Welcome to our discussion about Project MKultra, a deep dive into a murky chapter of the CIA's behavioral modification research. It's like diving into a secret world from the 50s and 60s where unethical experiments were carried out under a veil of cloak and dagger secrecy.
Yep, I'm absolutely stunned by how much detail we now know, from secret safe houses in New York and San Francisco to the way funds were miscategorized to hide experiments. It's all both fascinating and disturbing, isn't it?
Absolutely. The hearing transcripts tell us that through diligent Freedom of Information Act requests, an employee uncovered 7 boxes of documents, boxes that were thought to have been destroyed as early as 1973. Those documents reveal details about 149 sub-projects under MKultra, covering everything from behavioral drug testing to research on hypnosis and even the so-called magician's art used for covert operations.
The magician's art part really caught my attention, using techniques borrowed almost from stage illusions in espionage. How exactly is that supposed to work in an intelligence context?
It's like, they were trying to engineer covert tricks to administer drugs without the subject's awareness, sort of distracting their attention while the real experiment was underway. It's bizarre, intertwining deception with scientific research to modify human behavior without consent.
Right, that's both innovative and outright unethical. And speaking of unethical, what about the safe houses? I've read that these experiments were actually conducted in controlled settings on unwitting people. What do we know about that?
Well, from the documents, it appears that the CIA set up safe houses, one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast, where unwitting individuals, including even Native Americans and criminal subjects, were given drugs like LSD surreptitiously. The idea was to observe behavioral modifications without truly informed consent.
That's horrifying. And then there's the issue surrounding that $375,000 contribution for a hospital building fund, which, as it turns out, was actually CIA money disguised as a private donation. How does that even work?
Right, so the CIA arranged a scheme where their funds were funneled as a private donation, which then triggered matching federal construction funds, over $1 million in some cases. The purpose was to finance a hospital wing where, allegedly, some of these experiments could take place under controlled clinical conditions. It's really a convoluted way to keep the money and intentions hidden.
That sounds like a classic case of misdirection and deliberate obfuscation. I mean, if the money was used to build a facility even remotely tied to these experiments, wouldn't that be entirely in breach of ethical practices?
Exactly, and that's the moral crux of the entire issue. Some senators were particularly outraged, demanding better oversight and accountability. They questioned whether the CIA ever informed Congress or even the president about these projects. It's like the entire system was designed to operate in a shadow, where misclassification of financial documents allowed unethical experiments to slip through unnoticed.
And that's just not acceptable. Right, so the Senate hearings aim to not only uncover these abuses, but also to recommend legislation to expand protections for human subjects in all federally funded research, including intelligence projects. What did you think about that push?
I think it's a crucial step forward. The hearings emphasize that the actions, we're talking about behavior modification experiments on unwitting Americans, are utterly abhorrent. The committees want to ensure that something like this never happens again by establishing clearer statutory guidelines. It's like a necessary confrontation with the past to prevent another repeating of these dark experiments.
One thing that struck me was how, even though Admiral Turner testified that the experiments are long in the past and no longer active, senators still pressed him on matters like not interviewing key figures, such as Mr. Gottlieb, who once led much of this work. Doesn't that raise questions about accountability in the agency?
It does. While Admiral Turner maintained that he found no evidence of deliberate concealment, his failure to follow up with key former personnel left some senators unsettled. There's a hint of blame shifting, as if the responsibility for a full accounting is partly evaded. It's like saying, we did our due diligence, but not digging deep enough to address every lingering doubt.
Yeah, that's a point well taken. Shifting gears a bit, Did they discuss anything about the so-called truth drugs used during interrogations? I'm curious. Were they really effective?
Oh, they went in depth on that. The hearings covered a range of substances, from barbiturates like sodium amytal to scopolamine, and even explorations into narcoanalysis. Despite the popular myth of a magic truth serum, the experts conceded that these drugs merely muddled responses. They can lower inhibitions and mix up truth with fantasy. Even under these experiments, subjects with strong psychological defenses could resist, while other individuals might produce unreliable, confused confessions.
Exactly. It's almost ironic. A drug that promises to coerce the truth out of someone just ends up producing a cocktail of unreliable information that is, frankly, far from actionable intelligence.
Precisely. The consensus was that no such magic serum exists. Instead, these drugs simply provide rapid but often contaminated output, which leads to the conclusion that conventional and ethically administered interrogation methods with proper oversight are far more reliable.
And given all this, what are the lasting implications of MKULTRA? How does it impact current policies and public trust?
The legacy is heavy. It exposed a systemic failure where the need for national security was used as a blanket justification for unacceptable human experimentation. Nowadays, there's a strong push for transparency in intelligence work, along with strict oversight to ensure that ethical standards are adhered to. It's a stark reminder that national interest should never compromise individual rights.
Absolutely right. I also find it striking that many participating researchers and institutions were completely unaware of the CIA sponsorship behind their work. That raises enormous questions about informed consent in research.
Exactly, and that's one of the core criticisms. Many universities and research institutions unwittingly aided these programs, and now some senators argue they should be notified so they can protect their reputations and ensure ethical procedures going forward.
Some might argue, though, that releasing those details could endanger the privacy rights of individuals. How do you balance that?
That's a tough balance to strike. Admiral Turner himself noted the legal obligations under the Privacy Act not to publicly disclose the names of people involved. The idea is to notify institutions privately so they can prepare appropriate responses without public smear. It's like protecting both national security secrets and individual rights.
True. And it's interesting how even decades later, questions remain. Like what exactly happened in those hospital wings, or whether any experiments involved terminally ill patients. That gap in the records leaves us with more questions than answers.
Absolutely. The documentation reveals suggestions that these projects might have even touched on areas like testing drugs on vulnerable patient groups, but much of that evidence remains classified or ambiguous. This forced some senators to challenge the agency to produce clearer answers, further fueling distrust.
That ambiguity is a real issue. And then there's the broader question about how foreign powers might be experimenting with similar methods today. The hearing even touched upon whether adversaries could be developing truth drugs or behavioral modification techniques.
Right. The officials admitted they know of foreign research in those areas, though details are sketchy. This raises not only ethical but also national security concerns. If similar experiments are being run elsewhere, it reinforces the need for strict oversight and continued cognitive vigilance on our part.
Exactly. So, in summary, M-Culture shows us an example of extreme overreach under the guise of national security, yet its legacy helps shape today's stronger, more transparent oversight. We're left with painful lessons from the past that continue to inform policy decisions.
Precisely. It reminds us that while secrecy may sometimes be necessary in intelligence work, it must never come at the expense of ethics and individual rights. The historical record of M-Culture forces us to ask tough questions and hopefully to set higher standards in our research and policy practices today.
This discussion truly is a testament to the complexity of balancing national security with human rights. Thank you for this enlightening conversation. It really shows how important transparency and accountability are in all governmental affairs.
thank you as well. It's been a vigorous conversation, delving into both the dark aspects of MKultra and the necessary measures the government now must take. Until next time, keep questioning and learning, because these lessons from the past are our best guides to a better future.
For sure.